G'day, you mob. How's it going? Welcome to this episode of the Goss, the series where I sit down with my old man, good old Ian, and we chat about the week's news, current affairs, things about Australia, things in our history, stories, all sorts of stuff. The basic aim of these episodes is to give you access to all kinds of vocab, expressions, and aspects of English so that you can build your listening comprehension. Don't forget, guys, if you want access to the full episodes of the Goss, that's all of the different episodes we've done, but also they tend to be about 40 to 50 minutes long in entirety, and there's also a full video. You can get the transcript, you can download the MP3s, everything like that. Make sure that you sign up for the premium podcast membership at aussieenglish.com.au/podcast. So guys, in today's episode, we talk about ethical ecological tourism and the recent stories coming out about elephants and tigers and their treatment in Thailand. We talk about mullets and how that haircut might get you tossed out of a private school. We talk about zombie fires in the Arctic and also 42,000-year-old worms that were found in permafrost in the Arctic. And we also talk about why the worm C. elegans is such an awesome organism. And then lastly, we talk about how smoky mice, a beautiful species of Australian native rat or mouse, they're sort of the same thing, has made a comeback after the 2019-2020 bushfires. So it's a good sign for Aussie wildlife after such a harrowing and horrible bushfire season. Anyway, without any further ado, guys, let's just kick that kookaburra squarely in the butt and let's get started. I had some article here about new footage that's been released by the World Animal Protection Organization that shows baby elephants being treated cruelly for tourism trade in Thailand. So the footage released shows baby elephants being wrenched from their mothers and poked with sharp objects and effectively being broken in like horses with pretty torturous kind of practices. And so Ben Pearson from the WAP was saying, elephants are intelligent animals, they're sentient beings, and frankly, their mothers and babies have a bond which is similar to us. We know in the case of one of these elephants, she's had her baby taken 4 times, different babies 4 times, and this has had immense trauma as a result. And then they tie them down and they beat them, and that's the only way that they can sort of get them to take on the tasks that they need them to do as they raise them. So he continues, they're wild animals. They don't want to be in contact with human beings. The only way an elephant would submit to doing something like that, like being ridden or being in a pool of water while a bunch of tourists splash water on them, is if they've gone through this brutal training practice.
Fear.
Yeah, and what's distressing is the trauma and the cruelty is intentional. I mean, that's part of the process. Essentially, the baby elephant has its spirit broken and therefore can be used in the tourist trade. And that the WAP is urging travellers to seek out ethical tourism. So, I mean, this sort of came to my attention a few years ago when I was doing my master's degree. There were a bunch of people who were, everyone was pretty much an animal lover doing zoology. But I remember one of the guys that I knew went over to Thailand and worked in the tiger temple. And that, I think, in 2014, 2016, it came out so that they had like these monks that take care of tigers in Thailand that, for whatever reason, can't be released back into the wild. They have something like 160 tigers, and in the recent years, 50% of those have died. They charge money from tourists, 600 baht or something, just to enter the temple, and then they have to pay to pat the tigers, to feed them, to have pictures taken with them. The tigers are often drugged, allegedly, and sedated, so that they don't injure the people.
Come and feed them your arm. Yeah.
And the National Geographic report alleged monks are operating a for-profit business intentionally. WFFT alleged wildlife trafficking was taking place. In 2014, authorities told how 3 male tigers went missing. They were microchipped by law, but then the vet that resigned from the temple was like, yeah, we removed those. Yeah. And in 2016, the police raided the place and found 40 dead tiger cubs in their kitchen's freezer with other animal body parts. The weird thing about it is that Westerners end up volunteering there or potentially even paying to work there. And so the guy that I knew that went was totally brainwashed into this is really good. It's helping the environment. But I guess my sort of question here talking about these things is multifaceted. What do you think of that sort of behavior, but also what right do we have as tourists to tell other countries how they can treat animals and what they can do in their own countries? And what role do we have at, avoiding those kinds of things? Because you would see that in America, if you watch Tiger King, the TV series, effectively the exact same thing is happening in the US.
Of course, yeah.
So are we hypocrites?
Well, we're hypocrites if we participate in something and then criticise it.
Yeah.
Unless we are intending that our participation can change whatever is going on. I think there is an element of, and it's ambiguous in that, you can't tell another country what they can do. Well, I'm sorry, yes, you can. That's what wars have been fought over.
Yeah.
Pol Pot in Cambodia. You mean if we had known about that, well, we'd have just sat there and gone, yeah, that's all right. It's Cambodia. Well, it's not. It's Laos as well. Oh, well, I'm just, falling into Vietnam and Thailand. And, so, Hitler in Germany, when he declared war effectively, we didn't, Britain declared war on him after he had basically invaded Poland. Ironically, the invasion of Poland was probably warranted, but not from the reasons he was doing it. And that's, I'm not going to go into modern European history, but so, at the extreme end, we as countries will sit there and look at, this is not okay, what another country is doing, and therefore we will interfere. Then you come down to, well, is Hitler invading Poland at the same scale as, monks in Thailand, breeding and or capturing tigers and treating them badly? It is the same. It's just a different ends of the spectrum.
You could also argue, sorry to interrupt you there, that Western societies like Great Britain 100 years ago, 200 years ago would have had the equivalent setups.
Of course.
But we've moved past that as we've moved socioeconomically out of that
When
same
I was a child,
stage.
Melbourne Zoo used to do elephant rides.
Yeah.
They stopped it when I was a young child, so I never got to ride an elephant.
Damn it!
And
just in my dreams.
Exactly. And there's a natural human inquisitiveness about wanting to try these sort of adventurous things, but at the same time, the reason the zoo stopped doing it is because the message behind that is that these animals are there for human entertainment, and what zoos around the world have been trying to do is to say, keeping animals in captivity is about education and conservation. We want, captive breeding programs, and we want to educate people about the environment and the animal's place in the environment and so on. It's not about, throw monkeys at the peanuts and ride the elephant
peanuts
around.
at the monkeys.
Yeah, exactly. I deliberately said that one because
I was like, that's funny.
Yeah, because
here's a bag of monkeys. You got some peanuts there in the enclosure.
Yeah, that's really what it was. It really was just, we'll do anything to entertain people.
Well, that's how it first started, right? Where during the colonial era, I would imagine you had a lot of people discovering all these weird animals around the world and then capturing them.
Putting them into private collections.
Zoos
were private collections originally in Europe.
And getting people to pay to come in and just enjoy it.
Yeah, and they were there for entertainment. And that had its place, whether we agree or disagree, and I disagree with it in principle, but that had its place in history, but it doesn't mean we have to repeat that history.
Well, and that's the other thing. I feel like it's kind of condescending too to say to a lot of countries that, we used to do it and they're passing through the same thing now. Even if you're talking about fossil fuels or about women's rights or race relations, and you're like, yeah, okay, but at the same time, when we passed through it, there wasn't another reference over there. Yes. Hey, check out on the internet how Australia's acting. We should use them as a role model. It was no one knew any better, and we were all stumbling through it, and we had no other role models, whereas the other countries today can look anywhere else in the world and be like, okay, how do they have their things set up, evaluate it, and then reassess their own?
And it's a misguided patronising attitude of, and we've used the terms before about white middle-aged privilege, because mostly the people who are participating in that sort of tourism are white middle-aged, or at least they are wealthy. there's plenty of other Asians who are not participating in those things directly, but will go as tourists to those things because they've got the money and they want to do it.
I'm sure I've got a load of Thai listeners, but it'd be amazing to know what they think of this. And do they go to the Thai
exactly.
temple, or is that something where they're just like, ooh,
I'm not going to touch that.
This is the Westerners thing.
And I think there's also an element there of saying, and look, in the case of monks, you've got to look at it and go, is this anti what they are about? Is there sort of moral and ethical philosophy being compromised by what they are doing, in which case they're just criminals?
Yeah.
As opposed to, for example, rhino and elephant poachers in Africa, who are traditionally very poor village people who are participating in a daisy chain of economics.
It's like drug trafficking, right?
Yeah, that they simply don't understand, but they know they will be paid for providing rhino horn or elephant tusks.
And it'll be enough to put food on the table.
And it'll be enough to put food on the table and so on. The real criminals in that case are the people who are buying it from them and then on selling it to other markets and so on. So, are we to look at Kenya and Tanzania and Zimbabwe and things and go, you've got to stop this poaching, when we as the rest of society are actually not us, every individual, but there are other countries around the world that are buying those products.
Well, the hardest thing with the poaching thing, and I think we've spoken about this before, is that you almost need to commercialize the animals that are being poached, give them a value so that they get protected and bred up. And you can then use the revenue to pay people to protect the animals to have a trade. But if there's no revenue, unfortunately, as much as people hate the capitalist system, if there's no way of making money from it, people are not going to care about whether or not it exists.
That's right. And I think the alternative is, and I sit there and I've had that discussion with some environmentalists and so on. And some people sit on that side of the fence saying, look, we should just allow hunting of big game animals in Africa, but we do it in a controlled way. Yeah. And if we've got, rich middle-aged white men from Europe or America or Australia who want to spend $50,000 to go and shoot a lion, then go and shoot a lion, but you can only shoot that lion in that place.
And we'll take the 50 grand
and we'll take the 50 grand and use it to,
a bunch of other lions.
Conserve other lions. Now, I don't sit in that. I sit in the same saying that if you've got somebody who's shooting lions, that's just a bad thing and we shouldn't be encouraging it under any circumstances. Yeah. What we should be doing, I think, is creating and fostering ecologically friendly tourism. And so, the fact that, people will go, there'll be a very small number of people who will pay a huge amount of money to go and hunt big game in Africa.
Yeah.
There will be huge numbers of people who will pay a moderate amount to go and see big game animals in Africa.
Well, I guess that's the economics of it.
Finding the economics.
You have to work out, do I get fewer customers that pay more with the shooting of lions, or do I get, much more paying less?
And look, the hunting argument is not the case in places like the Galapagos, but the Galapagos is basically at capacity for tourism.
Yeah.
And
in terms of the external damage that gets done to the place.
And the Ecuadorian government cap the number of tourists there, the number of tourist boats, the number of tourists on boats, and those sort of things that are coming around. And they literally program the schedules of those so that you don't get more than one boat on an island at a time, and those sort of things are happening. So the same sort of thing could happen in places like Asia and Africa, where people are going to, I want to go out and see, I'd love to see tigers in the wild.
Fuck that.
But
in order for me, a truck.
But in order for me to do that, there needs to be a fair amount of infrastructure created. Yeah. How much of that infrastructure is going to adversely affect the ecology that we actually want to go and participate in? So it's a much more complex thing, which is, unfortunately, it's a complex solution to a simple problem. Yeah, let's just stop these people from doing that to tigers, or let's stop, Thai elephant trainers from treating elephants that way.
Yeah.
But the fact is that many people in those village lifestyles in that part of Asia have used elephants for hundreds of years as beasts of burden.
Well, and that's where I want to say, where is it for us? I mean, we get kind of grossed out when it's a tiger or it's an elephant, but we have no issue with breaking horses in or with doing the same sort of thing to dogs or other animals. So it is one of those things where it is funny that we have these sacred cows when it comes to certain majestic animals, but then other animals, well, chickens will eat them. Fuck
exactly.
it. What do we give a shit?
Yeah,
and yet elephants, it's like, no, Jesus, no.
And the whole sort of animal welfare and animal rights movements over the last 50 years have done a lot for, removing, really bad livestock treatment for chickens, for pigs, for those sorts of animals where, they lived in horrendous conditions just to produce food economically. And a lot of that is disappearing. You walk through a supermarket, any supermarket in Australia now, and there'll be free-range chicken, free-range eggs, chickens not kept in battery barns, all those sort of things. And so they're just becoming more common. And we've now accepted that we're going to pay a little bit more for that sort of food. We're going to pay a little bit more for the sort of ecological tourism that we want to go and see. But it's going to be done in a way that is ecologically sustainable, as well as being, in the case of the elephants, it's not about ecological sustainability, it's about animal welfare. But are we going to say to people in Thailand or Burma or places like that, say, well, I'm sorry, you can't keep elephants anymore?
Well, and it seems like it's one of those things where the issue will be
we're
solved.
okay keeping horses and cows and things as beasts of burden.
Exactly. But it seems like we need to raise up all boats. If you can get these people into a better socioeconomic position, they're going to be less likely to partake in behaviours that we used to do that we consider today to be, inhumane. But that's the thing. A lot of the time we're happy to point the finger and be like, you guys are doing the wrong thing, but we're not going to help you get to a position like we're in where we don't choose to do that and we spend more money on making it a better place. Yeah. And it seems like it's going to have to be that to solve things like climate change and cruelty to animals.
And sometimes it's the small things, and some people would say they're often trivial at the individual level. But I remember when France was doing nuclear testing in the Pacific back in the 1970s, I just made a moral decision to say I'm not going to buy anything that comes from France. Yeah. Now, the French government and French companies probably, who cares? Here's one teenager in Australia who's not going to buy something from France. And let's face it, the import-export between France and Australia for a teenager is probably pretty low because mostly it's food and wine. Yeah. But, if there was French cheese, I would choose not to buy French cheese. Yeah. When I bought a car, I chose not to buy a French car and so on. Now, the French stopped doing that, mostly under, political pressure. And part of that political pressure is your average person just making a minor stand. It didn't cost me anything to not buy French. It might have cost me a few cents or a few dollars to buy something from another country or from Australia or whatever, an import good. But if everybody does those little things, then it can help. And in the case of the Thai elephants as a tourist thing, the best thing you can do is just not go. But go to Thailand and spend your money on things that are ecologically sustainable or that are not doing things to animals just purely to entertain people and so on. And it's why animals have disappeared from circuses. We don't have animal acts in circuses anymore because of cruelty to animals. Not that the things were dangerous. People love going and watching, the tiger tamer and the lion tamer and people riding elephants around in a circus. But when you saw the conditions that those animals were kept in and the training methods that were used, people just said, no, enough. And it stopped. So, these things can stop. And look, Thailand has a huge tourist industry now. And I think there are plenty of ways of spending your dollar or your baht in Thailand that are not involving animal cruelty.
Alrighty. Have you got another story?
I do. And you sort of intimated it earlier on. The mullets being banned by a Western Australian Catholic private school.
Well, feel free to bring it up. Do you want to talk about what they were talking about in that story?
Or? Well, I mean, this is a church-run private school in Western Australia, and they have sent letters. Apparently one student had long hair, and you look at the photograph, and
it's a mullet.
I'm not going to complain about people with long hair, clearly, but it's a mullet. And traditionally, the mullet is the short hair on top and the long hair behind. And in the 1970s and 80s, it was to use another Australian term, it was the bogan haircut. So it was always seen as being culturally inappropriate for the more conservative part of our society.
Well, it's weird, isn't it? Because you see guys with it today going around the place, but it tends to be young dudes who are kind of, I'll have this haircut even though I know it's gross.
Yeah.
And I just don't care.
And it's different from, I've got long hair, but my hair's long all over.
It'll be though like shaved all over the top,
around
and
the
then
top,
there's
and then the
little
rat tails at the back.
Yeah,
and that guy's not bad, but you look at it and you go, yes, this is a private school, and so I have a moral objection to private schools taking government money. I don't have a moral objection to private schools. Anybody can set up a business, and part of a business might be education. You went to a private school. We sent you to a private school, but when a school is taking government money, the majority of their money comes from the government. And then they are making rules that are really about how people look and behave. I just sit there and go, surely you've got better things to spend your time worrying about than whether somebody needs a haircut or not.
Well, I think from a business perspective, it's their market, it's their marketing, it's their brand protection. So they're trying to show that everyone is high class, we're all conformist,
conservative, conforming, and I agree with that entirely. If that's what your brand is, but don't take government money. Yeah. If you want to set yourself, you can set yourself up to be the ratbag lunatics. I don't care.
Yeah,
but don't expect me as a taxpayer to fund that. You're a private school. That's what we call them in Australia, private schools. But the majority of their money still comes from government funding.
Well, I looked up the rules for Geelong College, the school that I went to, because I remember there being
the hair length rules.
Hair rules, yeah. So
you dyed your hair over the summer one twice. In fact, I remember doing red and blue.
I bleached my hair and then I
dyed
used
it red
some
and blue.
Red and blue dye, but it kind of washed out.
Yeah, it washes out in a few weeks. But I remember you saying that, I might have to get my hair cut to get rid of the blue by the time I go back to school.
I think I had to go back. I went back to school and it was bleached. My hair was bleached and it was growing back, and they whinged and they were like, you need to dye your hair a natural colour. I'm like, but there are plenty of people with bleached color, like blonde hair.
Yeah.
But it was
plenty of girls with blonde hair.
Yeah, but it was, so their rules were just that way, I guess. But looking here, the general guidelines, hair is to be neat, one natural color, and no extremes in style, not extreme in style.
Yeah.
And then you look under boys, hair is to be neat and of a reasonable style and length, in brackets, above the collar. So you weren't even allowed to have long hair. Your hair wasn't allowed.
Hey, my hair's, my hair was nearly this long when I was at high school. But
one natural
color. But then
colour,
everybody's was.
And it should not be excessively gelled or waxed.
Yeah.
And then for girls, it is hair is to be one natural colour, if below the shoulders must be tied back rather than pulled or clipped back off the face. It must not be excessively gelled or waxed. Ribbons and hair bands can be white, navy, college green, or Gordon tartan. So they even decide on what colour you can use in terms of...
Yeah, if you're wearing a school uniform, I think that's fine. I mean, it was the Gordon tartan colours. It was navy, white and green, bottle green. If you then wore a red ribbon in your hair, I can see why the school objects to that, because they have a code for uniform. But when you look at it, you go, if I were a girl, my haircut is perfectly reasonable. If I'm a boy, it's not.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing.
And you sit there and go, really? This is now you deciding how people look based on your conservative, conformist views of the world, which again, if that's what you want to do and people are paying $25,000 a year to go to that school, if that's what people want to do, fine. But don't take government money and tell people how to look.
Yeah. What can you do?
End of rant.
Hottest day ever recorded in north of the Arctic Circle.
100 degrees.
It reached 100 Fahrenheit, which is 38 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
80 years faster than expected. So Siberia is currently in the grips of a 6-month-long heat wave. And in the town of, and I'm going to butcher this, but I'll try, Verkjøyangst, I think I probably butchered that, 67.5 degrees north latitude. It has been 32 degrees Celsius above their normal high temperature. And so, if verified, this is likely the hottest temperature ever recorded in Siberia and also the hottest temperature ever recorded north of the Arctic Circle, which begins at 66.5 degrees north. So they've had something like 10 days of 30 degrees Celsius plus and it's 20 to 25 degrees higher than it should be. And the average heat across Russia from January to May is so remarkable at the moment that it matches what's projected to be the norm after the year 2100,
yeah.
if current trends in heat trapping carbon emissions continue. So how crazy is that?
Yeah, it's bizarre. And the ecological effects of that are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you've got ecologies, habitats there that are in permafrost, that it never gets hot enough for long enough for the ground to thaw.
Yeah. It's always frozen.
And it's always frozen.
Permanently frost.
Permafrost. That will no longer exist.
Yeah.
What happens to the organisms that have evolved over tens of thousands of years?
Longer. Yeah.
Hundreds, potentially millions of years in those areas, because those areas are the remnants of the ice ages.
Yeah.
They're just simply going to literally the physical fabric of the environment is going to fall apart.
Yeah.
They're going to turn into marshland over summer and then freeze. So when you're freezing melted water, it expands, and therefore you get these all sorts of horrible physical things happening to plants and animals. Plants and animals that can survive in frozen environments are fine, but they don't go from sub-frozen to frozen. Now we're going to have these things where ice is going to be melting, and then it'll freeze again in winter. And then if it gets the same thing next summer, it'll melt again. And so those whole environments are going to change.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing the Arctic's also experiencing apparently is zombie fires. Did you hear about that and read those stories?
No.
So these zombie fires are the fires that burned last season, and they never stop smouldering through the fierce and bitter cold Arctic winter.
Yeah, because they'll be sitting under snow.
Yeah, blazes that have smouldered underground in the Arctic after last year's fires season have erupted above the surface in Alaska, Canada, Greenland, and Russia, threatening to burn thousands of acres this season, scientists have said.
Yeah.
And they suspect the fires have just continued burning underground in the peat moss or whatever it is that's now thawed out, and then re-erupted in the heat.
This is in areas where there is, it's not permafrost, but where you get a layer of snow that hits in autumn, or fall, as they call it in North America. But and that snow acts as an insulator, so that underneath it, you can survive. And it's one of those things. If you're in a blizzard, the best thing to do is to bury yourself under the snow.
Yeah,
find a way of burying yourself under the snow, because the snow then acts as an insulator. And you don't then have the problems of these severe temperatures above them. And so that's what will have happened. They'll have been sitting under snow. The snow melts and they go, oh, oxygen.
Well, and they were saying the boreal forests and Arctic peatlands hold as much carbon as the rest of the world's vegetation.
Yeah.
So if that's suddenly exposed to being able to be burnt, and we're going to have effectively these massive bushfires potentially erupting in the Arctic every single year as well, there's going to be a lot more carbon dioxide going into the air, which is going to lead to a runaway climate change, global warming. And they were saying 3,000 wildfires were reported in Canada alone last year. So it is interesting, but I wonder how much it's going to be a similar thing to COVID with climate change. At least this is sort of my hope, in terms of it's going to get to a point where people are going to shit themselves and be like, we need to throw everything we have at this issue.
Yeah.
And then we will finally get a solution to it. Because I feel like all we need to really do is obviously get away from fossil fuels, or be able to find a way of sucking them out of the atmosphere quickly enough that reduces their
We've got to be able to
persistence.
use carbon dioxide.
Yeah. So if we can find a way, and again, you kind of need to let the market onto the problem, right? We need to find a way of monetizing CO2.
Well, we did 20 years ago. That was the big thing of carbon credits.
Yeah.
So for a company that, in order to survive, it had to be burning fossil fuels, or at least do it secondarily, that is, using a lot of energy that was coming from fossil fuels in order to survive, they were buying carbon credits from other companies by, we'll pay for 1 billion trees to go out and be planted.
Yeah.
That will then reduce the carbon footprint of our company. Now, governments were supporting that 10 years ago, and Australian government just said, well, that's a stupid idea. We're not going to do that. A few years ago, the right-wing the Australian government at the time just went, no, that's a ridiculous thing to do. Again, if you don't believe in the solution, then the problem just goes away because, we don't have, this whole, carbon thing is just a waste of time. And so they stopped doing it. The thing is, though, it was cost neutral.
Yeah.
At worst, it was cost neutral. Yes, the government was allowing people tax breaks to participate in these things, but you got to look at it and go, what's the negative in doing this? The negative in doing this is that we're paying a bit more tax to allow this to happen, but we're planting millions of trees.
Well, I think the problem though is that it's like long-term, short-term issues, right? So we have a lot to lose short-term if we have to make all these concessions and change the way in which we're living or operating in the capitalist societies that we live in. But long-term, it's going to be better. So I think it's one of those things like COVID at the moment where the short term needs to be threatened significantly, where you then are encouraged to make a big sacrifice for long term.
It's an old argument tool rather than an analysis tool of the hazard matrix. And that is the two-dimensional matrix where there's the choice of do something or don't do something and the cost and the benefit of that. And so if there is a problem and we don't do anything, then then the problem becomes worse. If there's a problem and we do something, then we can potentially fix the problem. If there is no problem and we do nothing, who cares? If there is no problem and we've done something, then is that something going to be beneficial for us as well? So you end up with 3/4 of that matrix being do something.
Yeah.
and so it doesn't make any sense when you've got the vast majority of the world's scientific, community saying, climate change is real. Here's, 10 million pieces of evidence for it. And a few lunatics in political power and potentially wealthy business owners who have got a vested interest in carbon-based energy who are saying, oh, no. Why is the decision falling down that, on the side of the few lunatics than the rest of the world that just says, well, we should be doing something. Even if the scientists are wrong, there has to be a benefit to the things that we're coming up with. Alternative forms of energy, forgetting what we can do with carbon dioxide, but alternative forms of energy are ultimately going to be cheaper, more friendly, less polluting, regardless of whether we believe that carbon is a problem or not.
The innovation is going to be useful.
The innovation is going to be useful, whether or not. And so you just sit there and go, just do it.
Yeah.
Stop arguing and go and do it.
I guess that's the most difficult part about it is that not living in an authoritarian dictatorship, you can't just have one person at the top say, this is a good idea, we're doing it.
Yeah. But unfortunately, we have one person at the top saying this is not a good idea, so we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And therefore, the literal conservative part, the small c conservative part, will always win when you've got economics against logic. And because the economic argument is a very easy one to win in short-term politics, as you suggested. So you're right. I think this, COVID-19 is a good example of, and a friend and ex-colleague of mine, we taught together 100 years ago. He always used to say things about, when you've got problems in any situation, sometimes you have to precipitate a crisis or you've got to exploit a crisis. And COVID-19 is a good example. And that might be something that we can exploit that crisis to say, hey, look, a whole lot of things happened, but we fixed it. It took us a long time to fix it, and it will, but we fixed it by taking action. We didn't fix it by sitting on our hands going, oh, it'll all be okay.
Yeah.
So,
do you think you'll see it in your lifetime, at least significant action taken?
I won't see the result in my lifetime.
Yeah.
But I think we will see, I think within the next 5 years, there will be a watershed around the world of having to take climate action.
We just need more protests, man. We can sort out racism, we can sort out viruses, and we can sort out climate change. We're on a good path.
Yeah. And look, the protest thing is it's a good argument that, and I've just finished writing this part of, the family history stuff around.
I'm trying to sell this book to my audience, Dad.
Yeah, no, trust me, it will be as boring as batshit for everybody else. But
without our surname. Noah, if you're watching this, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, there's 100 people around the world with our surname, and half of those are not related to us anyway. and they're talking about protests, because the biggest protest that I've ever been directly involved in was the Vietnam moratorium march that happened in 1970. There were, I think, 3 marches in 1970, and I went to the first one. And there were estimated to be 100,000 people marching in the streets of Melbourne.
Jesus.
And, you know,
we wouldn't have seen anything like that since, right?
No, we have never seen anything like
Even with the climate change, even with Black Lives Matter.
That would be the equivalent now of 250,000 people marching in the streets, because the population of Melbourne was less than 2 million.
In fact, we probably saw that during White Night. They weren't protesting, but they were in the streets. So there was 1 million people.
And you get 500,000 people in Sydney for New Year's Eve wandering around the streets. So people are happy to go out and party, but they're not happy to stand up and say, stop it.
Too busy getting pissed.
And exactly. And look, that movement, that moratorium movement in the early 1970s was one of the factors in changing a government who said, we're going to get out of Vietnam. And that, so sometimes you do have to have those, the passive protests against something. In order for something to happen. And the challenge with, we've talked about Black Lives Matter, we've talked about climate change. You can't protest against people not taking action, because the anti-Vietnam thing was very simple. There were 4 things, basically, all of which came down to get out of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And it was a very simple case. You got 100,000 people marching in the street, all having exactly the same message. And it was a call to action on the government to say, you can do this now. The trouble with something like climate change is the government can't do anything now. What they can do is plan to set things in motion that mostly are going to be reliant on we in the community to be able to do. So it's a much more complex thing than just literally flicking a switch, which is what the Whitlam government did in Vietnam. Yeah. As soon as they came into power in 1972, they just said, right, we're no longer sending any people to Vietnam, and we're getting out as soon as we can. And that was it. Whereas climate change, you can't say, all right, we're going to stop producing carbon.
Yeah.
All right, good. Our economy just dies tomorrow.
Wow, that's it.
But it's a 10 to 20 year plan that has to come in. And there are some things that people can be doing, and closing dirty, old, coal burning refineries is a good example of that. And we're doing that. But we're not taking that opportunity. When the power station in the Latrobe Valley was closed a few years ago, and it was something in the ridiculous order of $1 billion or more of cleanup to actually shut this thing down over a 10-year period. So why didn't we spend $2 billion and create a new industry there at the same time?
Well,
while we're pulling this building down.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. But one was required, but all you had to do was go, and you've got thousands of people in the Latrobe Valley who lost employment and business opportunity because of closing this thing down. Why not say, well, we're going to employ 1,000 people in a new thing, have a recycling plant. It was the perfect place to build a recycling plant. Why didn't they do it?
Yeah.
It's there. And they're the sort of examples of that short-term, long-term problem in politics.
Well, and our system needing to be fixed in particular, right?
Yeah, well, when you have a 3-year cycle in federal government, seriously, you spend a year governing the middle year, you spend a year breaking promises after you've been elected, and then the 3rd year you spend just trying to get elected. And so, politicians' jobs in Australia, particularly federal politicians' jobs in Australia, are to get re-elected. They're not to run the country. That's why I'm so over it.
I think I'm a bit disenchanted with the whole thing, because you can just see that they're just playing the game constantly, and it doesn't feel like anything gets done. You just literally are just saving your ass.
And it's a bigger game because the Prime Minister can call an election whenever they feel like it.
Yeah.
And so
then it lasts for another 3 years after that.
Yeah. So you can have, you can call an election after 18 months.
Yeah.
And then you have another 3 years, and then you call another election. And so they're calling elections when they think they can be re-elected.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Of course. Yeah. It's exactly. The system is, they're not doing anything illegal or even immoral. It's just,
playing the game the way that you should play it.
Yeah, you set the rules of the game. You can't complain about the way people play. But that's the biggest
issue you were saying, where their focus is now not on how do we improve Australia and the lives of Australians first and foremost. It's how do we end up maintaining power to potentially, hopefully make a difference to Australians in the future. But first and foremost, we need power to do that, which makes sense from one side. But if it ends up getting in the way of you actually ever doing anything constructive, when you have the capacity to do it, I would much prefer that, our leaders were willing to throw themselves under the bus politically and sacrifice themselves in order to get good policy brought through and make a difference.
Look, individuals do, but parties don't.
Yeah.
And the trouble is that now that we have, politicians are not employed by the population to run the country, they're effectively answerable to their party to get re-elected. All of the policy they come up with is party policy. It's not policy to run the country better and make things more efficient and get rid of this and do that. It's all about getting re-elected. And at least in the States, certainly in Victoria, we have 4-year terms for our lower house, and the elections are held every 4 years on a date. It's a date. It's a weekend in November every 4 years. So when the next state election is going to be. So they can't manipulate the electorate to just go to the people whenever they feel like they've got a better chance of winning. And 4 years is better than 3. I think 4 years is probably about ideal. Having sat on the wrong end of a federal government at the moment, you sit there and go, what if they'd won for 5 years? And we couldn't get rid of them for 5 years, because then they've effectively got 3 or 4 years of just
piss farting around.
Well, not only piss farting around, but just going like this to the rest of the community, because there's nothing you can do. Whereas on a 3-year term, you're constantly on the edge. Because you know that it will be in people's memory what you are doing now when the next election comes up. Yeah.
So the last story I have here isn't recent. It's from 2018, so it's 2 years old. But for some reason it came up. I found it somewhere and I was just like, this is fucking cool. So an organism has been unfrozen in the Siberian permafrost.
Oh, yeah.
And it is 42,000 years old. What do you think it is?
A slime mold?
Nah.
No, a frog.
Nah. That's a bit too complex of an organism.
Well, maybe not, but yeah.
It's a worm, a nematode.
A worm. Yeah.
Actually, two different species of nematode. So the article started, and I'll read the first 2 paragraphs. Did you ever wake up from a long nap feeling a little disoriented? Not quite knowing not quite knowing where you were. Now imagine getting a wake-up call after being asleep, quote, for 42,000 years. In Siberia, melting permafrost is releasing nematodes, microscopic worms that live in soil, that have been suspended in a deep freeze since the Pleistocene.
Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're actually literally changing the ecology, because we're introducing new species.
So despite being frozen for tens of thousands of years, 2 species of these worms were successfully revived, scientists recently reported. So, the research represents the first evidence of multicellular organisms returning to life after a long-term slumber in Arctic permafrost. And nematodes, do you want to describe what they are? I can if you want, but...
Oh, they're just a very simple worm.
Yeah.
They're much more simple than even an earthworm.
So I guess it would be if you've ever had some kind of parasitic worm in your digestive system, which I've had when I was a kid. I remember those.
Nematodes are one
They're
type
nematodes.
of worm. Some of them are. Yeah. Very simple worm.
These ones are about 1 millimeter in length. They're known to possess, impressive abilities like living at 1.3 kilometers underground, deeper than any other organism or animal. Certain worms that live on an island in the Indian Ocean can develop 1 of 5 different mouths depending on the type of food that's available when they develop. I was like, what? And others are adapted to thrive. Yeah, others are adapted to thrive inside slug intestines and travel on slimy highways of slug poop.
There you go.
So for the new study, it was really interesting. They analysed 300 samples of Arctic permafrost deposits and found 2 that held several well-preserved nematodes. One was collected from a fossil squirrel burrow near Alazeyakh River in the northeastern part of Yakutia in Russia, from deposits estimated to be 32,000 years. The other one was from Kolymach River in northeastern Siberia, and the age of the deposit was 42,000 years. So they isolated the worms, all were females, and finding they represented 2 different species. I won't try and say those names. But I just thought it was really cool because it's like natural cryopreservation, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
And I think, it's just the only other organism that has been revived the same way is a virus, and it affects amoebas. It's this huge virus, again, in permafrost. But I like this story because I think C. elegans, and what's the full species name? I don't know if I'll be able to do it justice. Caenorhabditis elegans is a really cool model organism, right? That's used. We scientists learn about this stuff at uni, and I had a thing I wanted to read out here because I just think it's really epic. We learn about them being a model organism to study cell lineages or cell lineage, which denotes the developmental history of a tissue or organ from the fertilized embryo. So effectively, C. elegans has something like 1,000 cells that ever get made in its body from when it's a little embryo to when it's a full adult. And I'll just read the thing for you. As one of the first pioneers of cell lineage in the 1960s, Dr. Sidney Brennerfirst began observing cell differentiation and succession in the nematode C. elegans. He chose this organism due to its transparent body, quick reproduction, ease of access, and small size, which made it ideal for following cell lineage under a microscope. 16 years later, by 1976, Dr. Brenner and his associate Dr. John Solston had identified part of the cell lineage in developing the nervous system of C. elegans. Recurring results showed that the nematode was eutelic. Each individual experiences the exact same differentiation pathways of the cells. And so the research led to the initial observations of programmed cell death, apoptosis. And the last bit here, after mapping various sections of C. elegans' cell lineage, Dr. Brenner and his associates were able to piece together the first complete and reproducible fate map of a cell lineage. They later received the 2002 Nobel Prize for their work in genetic regulation of organ development and programmed cell death. Being that C. elegans are hermaphrodites, they consist of both male and female organs, where they store sperm and are able to self-fertilize. So C. elegans contains 302 neurons and 959 somatic cells, where they begin with 1,031 cells, where only 72 ever undergo apoptosis and die, which is the programmed cell death. This makes the C. elegans model organism for studying cell lineage and being able to observe the cell divisions due to their transparent phenotype. So I thought they're really epic because we can literally see how every single cell in its body differentiates what it does when it dies, and
they're all the same. Every organism is the same.
It's just nuts, right? Like you could literally see the 302 neurons, that's its brain.
Yeah.
And we know how every single one of them is attached, linked, like its entire brain is mapped. So, yeah. Anyway.
Cool.
Thought that would be a good place to end.
Well,
I've got
a puppies and kittens story.
You got a puppy and kitten story?
Yeah, puppy and kitten story that's a little less impressive than the nematode story. But Smoky Mouse has been found.
Yeah.
Which it's I don't need to tell you. You're the rat taxonomist.
Well, my friend did her PhD on Smoky Mouse, or masters on them.
Yeah.
And they were, PhD.
And they're a highly endangered mouse, placental mammal in Australia.
They're actually really cute. You might hear mouse or rat and think, but all the native ones are really beautiful.
And they only lived in two very small habitats, one in the Kosciuszko National Park and one in a forest in southeast New South Wales, both of which were severely affected by the bushfires.
Yeah.
And there was a fear that the two small populations had been completely wiped out, but they found some.
Well, ironically, this is what happened with Phoebe's research, I believe, in the Grampians, where it would have been the 2012 bushfires, maybe around there, where they went through those areas, because we've got the Smoky Mouse in Victoria as well, sort of east and west, where we have them in the Alpine National Park and in the Grampians. And it was the same thing of the bushfires completely went through and blitzed everything. But then when they were trapping afterwards, they found that the Smoky Mouse was still, kicking around and thriving. But they have these sort of boom-bust cycles, I think, where they can breed up their numbers really quickly, but also they get smashed by these sorts of things. So it's good to see that they're doing well.
This cute little mouse has been found again.
So well, it'll be interesting if we get an extinction called for any of the organisms from the 2019-2020 bushfires, right, in the next few years, because it'll take time to know.
Yeah, well, it will,
effects.
because, particularly for things like these, small mice, that clearly they burrow underground, and that's enabled them to survive. But if a lot of them are being killed and they're burrowed underground and they're estivating, for example, of just sitting there going, well, I'm just going to sit and wait.
Well, and that's the tragic thing, right? A lot of them survive. A lot of animals, probably the bulk, survive the bushfire, but then they awake and there's nothing to eat, or there's no cover, and they're exposed to predators.
Yeah.
I've seen some crazy stuff. I don't know which. I think there are two birds, right, in Australia, that birds of prey that can spread fire. I don't know if you know these.
Yeah.
But they effectively,
species, but two kites, I think.
Yeah, if a fire starts, they'll fly around and pick up
burning
stuff and drop it somewhere else to spread the fire in order to stay at the front and capture any animals that are escaping.
And particularly insects, because a lot of things like crickets and stuff, because these
fly up into the air,
and they go, right, I'll take you, and I'll take you, and I'll take you.
It's crazy, because I remember seeing there was a video going around. You probably find it on YouTube, but they were swarms of them. You know, you don't normally see birds of prey in big numbers.
And they hang around fire edges.
But it would have been dozens of them around a small grass fire, just hunting down all these animals and spreading it.
Mostly little rodents, lizards, and insects.
The last thing I wanted to say about the nematode one being 42,000 years frozen, what do you think the oldest organism on Earth is in terms of having lived from life to death? No, it's a tree. It's a tree. It's the Great Basin Bristol Cone Pine, apparently.
Bristol Cone, 6,000 years old.
Yeah, about that, 5,000 years old. Yeah. But I was going to ask, which is older then? Is the Bristol Cone that's lived for 5,000 years, or the nematode that's lived for probably
42,000 years with a 42,000 year gap in the middle of it?
Yeah, it was probably alive for a few days, a few weeks, and then...
Well, it's been alive the whole time. Yeah. It's just not functioning.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting one.
But that's, if you were put in cryo, like, I guess that would too be your biological age. Does that, can we break it down to that as well?
That then becomes a semantic argument as to how you define age, and there is no right answer. But yes, I've seen bristlecone pines.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a few of those trees, right? I think there was, I don't know if it's in Italy or Spain, but there's a few olive trees that are
believed to be Roman.
Yeah, they were planted by the Romans, and you're just like, what?
Yeah, which I think is even more bizarre than bristlecone pines, where you think these are olive trees planted in Mediterranean climates, warm climates in populated areas where the chance of them surviving is extremely low. Mm-hmm. Whereas bristlecone pines are alpine trees; they're living high up in mountains that people simply don't go to, but also they are extremely slow growing, so they're really robust.
Well, it'd be like someone having a vineyard or something, effectively, and the plant on a vineyard survives for thousands of years after the fact, and you just be like, well, what are the chances of that? I mean, assuming that vines could actually live that long. Anyway, Dad, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks,
See you
everyone.
next time.
See ya.
Bye.